Imagine you could step inside the minds of Canada's healthcare leaders, glimpse their greatest fears, strongest drivers, and what makes them tick. Welcome to Healthcare Changemakers, a podcast where we talk to leaders about the joys and challenges of driving change and working with partners to create the safest healthcare system.
Hey listeners, it's Michelle and Abby here from HIROC. Welcome to the first Healthcare Changemakers episode of 2026 and our 86th official episode. Time flies. On the episode, Abby and I talk with Renira Narrandes, Program Manager of the Knowledge Translation Program at SickKids in Toronto. We haven't talked on the show about knowledge translation or KT yet, so I'm excited about this one. Abby, what are some things Renira shares?
Yeah, I'm excited too. Renira tells us all about knowledge translation, what it is, what makes it challenging, and how healthcare leaders and clinicians can better understand this field. All the questions you've had about KT will likely be answered this episode. Renira also tells us about her journey deciding she wants to work in KT. She shares a snippet of her poem which touches on the expectations placed on her growing up. And it definitely moved Michelle and me. You don't want to miss it.
That's right. It was moving. So have a listen and don't forget to rate and review our show or share it with a friend. And now on to the episode.
Hi, Renira. Thank you for joining us. So for our listeners, tell us a bit about yourself and where you work.
Sure. Well, first and foremost, I consider myself a storyteller, but currently I work as the Knowledge Translation Program Manager with the Learning Institute at the Hospital for Sick Children, also known as SickKids. And I hate to say the words knowledge translation and not explain what it is, because in my experience, there has never been a time where I have said knowledge translation or KT and there hasn't been someone who doesn't quite understand what it is. So would you like me to explain a little bit more?
Yes, please. I would love that.
Okay, so at the SickKids Knowledge Translation Program, we do a lot of trainings on KT. And so we define KT as this over-encompassing term that includes two things. One is what we call dissemination, and the other thing is implementation. So dissemination is basically just sharing information or knowledge or evidence, but doing it in a way that makes sure that the evidence or knowledge you're sharing is easy to access, easy to understand, and that it's going to be of benefit. Now, even when I say those things, it probably still sounds a little bit vague to some listeners. So let me just go a little bit deeper into some examples of what this actually means. So thinking about, making knowledge or evidence easy to access, just picture, let's say a very busy nurse who's on the unit and all of a sudden she's got a question she needs to answer. And it could be a question that hasn't come up before and she needs to find the answer. She may not have time, or likely does not have time, to do a literature search or to, find what's the current best evidence-based practice on this. So these are the kinds of questions and challenges that we as knowledge translation professionals, also known as knowledge brokers, try to address. And we try to make sure that when that nurse has that question at that time, we are able to provide that knowledge on the spot. So that's just an example. You can think about, how to easily access information in other ways. And then the next thing is making sure that knowledge is easy to understand. So if you've ever read a journal article or several journal articles, which I'm sure many people have, you might have noticed that there can be some jargon in there, right? Some very technical terms, some p-values, some charts and graphs that I may not understand. And that's absolutely fine if you're trying to communicate that information to other researchers. But chances are there's other people out there that can benefit from that knowledge that you have. It could be teachers, it could be clinicians, it could be young people or patient populations. And if that's the case, we want to make sure that we are shaping that information in ways that each of those audiences can understand. Okay, so that's the second component of it. And the last thing is making sure that the evidence, the knowledge we're presenting is going to be of benefit to people. As in the KT field, we like to think of this as relevance. So, you can develop a research question. You can work on any project you want, but how do you make sure that what you're doing actually matters, that it's going to be relevant to the people that you're trying to help? We do this as knowledge brokers by talking to those people, by involving those people. So we will actually, think about who can benefit from this knowledge. And chances are it's going to be more people than you think. So we think about who those people are and we reach out to them and we try to involve them where it makes sense in a project. And when you do that, when you involve these people into your project, that is going to help you increase the relevance of that work, which ultimately is going to make what you're doing more beneficial to people. So those three things kind of roll up into what we mean when we say dissemination. And then the second component of KT is implementation. So let's say you have an intervention. It could be a care pathway. It could be, you've got a peer support program and you want to operationalize this in a setting, or perhaps it's something's already working in a setting and you want to expand. You want this to roll out in different settings. There's a lot of things that you need to think about in order to make this happen in the real world. So that's what implementation is. And together, those things form knowledge translation.
Thank you for breaking down KT so well and even giving examples. It'll help our listeners put things into context this episode. And quickly shifting gears a bit with an easy one, Renira.
Yeah.
What was your first job ever?
Boy, so does it have to be paid or not paid? Let me just answer for myself. I'm going to say not paid. The first or one of the first jobs I would say, I used to give out books and newspapers at the Health Sciences Center in Winnipeg. Fun fact, I grew up in Winnipeg. That would be it.
Oh, it's a very full circle one since it was within science too. And on that note, you have 3 master's degrees. Wow. Where does this desire to soak up knowledge and learning come from?
Well, I would say this desire to soak up knowledge and learn is definitely part of it, but there's also this element of just sheer confusion, not knowing what to do with my life and kind of navigating. So Abby, I'm not sure if I've told you my Genesis story, but I've definitely told Michelle. So maybe, I'll tell your listeners my Genesis story as well, just so that, you can understand how one might end up with 3 master's degrees.
Yes, please.
So, yeah, awesome. So, I come from an immigrant family. I was actually born in South Africa, and we moved to Canada when I was 2 years old. And at the time, it was to escape apartheid, which didn't end officially until I think it was 1993. So we moved. And if any listeners come from an immigrant family, and if you happen to be, of Asian or South Asian descent, you may have heard the message that, you should be a doctor or you should be an engineer, or you should be a lawyer. In my case, because my father was a physician, he wanted me to be a doctor. I've actually written a spoken word piece about it. I won't do the whole thing for you now, but let me just tell you the first line. It goes like this. I'm 16 when I tell my dad I want to write stories. That's great, he says. You're good at it, he agrees. And you'll have plenty of stories to tell about medical school. I try again. Dad, I don't know if I want to be a doctor like you. My brother is sitting there almost waiting for his cue. He says, if a man is dying, you can't save him with your poem. Do you think your pen can pump his heart and bring him back to life? Even a dying man isn't as tragic as you, excising Dad's immigrant dream with your metaphorical knife. I'll stop it there, but you get it, right? So, you come from this kind of background, you should be a doctor. So that was the message that I had. And I started off, undergrad in health sciences. And then something I didn't expect happened, something out of nowhere that kind of changed my life and my family's life forever. And that was one summer, I think I was in third year university. My dad got into a freak accident and he passed away. So after that happened, I was thinking and I thought, what, maybe I'll apply to medical school. But for right now, I'm going to do a master's in journalism because I love writing. I love, thinking like an investigative journalist. I love public speaking. Maybe I'll go into radio. I don't know, but I know that I'm really passionate about this area. So I did my master's in journalism. But you know what? That voice doesn't go away. The voice that says, you should be a doctor. It doesn't go away right away. And I don't think that that voice ever goes away until you feel like you've arrived. You feel like you've, arrived somewhere that you're meant to be. You feel like you've arrived somewhere where you're proud of yourself. Until that happens, that voice, I don't think it goes away fully. So as you can imagine, as a young person, early 20s, just graduated from a new program, I wasn't quite at that place just yet. And so that voice was still there. So I said, you know what? Let me get back into healthcare. And I discovered the field of occupational therapy, or OT. I thought it was really cool because it shifts away from the biomedical model. And I really like how it put patients or clients at the center of care. And it looks at them as a whole person and also considers, how does the environment that this person is in affect their health? So I loved that theoretically. But in practice, I realized I don't think, I want to be an OT. Now, don't get me wrong. There is nothing more fulfilling than helping people. And, being a frontline provider, getting, that immediate fulfillment, there's nothing like it. There's no Excel spreadsheet, there's no presentation, no strategic document. Even, you may help your coworkers, of course, but nothing, at least for me, compares to that feeling of helping people. So it was actually quite difficult to move away from that. But inside, I knew there's a storyteller in me. There's something else I'm meant to do, and it is not this. Of course, I didn't know what it was, really, but I had taken a course within OT on the social determinants of health, and I became fascinated about, this concept that our health is affected by all of these other things that we can't even control. Things like gender, race, ethnicity, employment status, income, where we were born, geographical location, our access to grocery stores. All of these things can affect our health. And I thought that was, really fascinating. Is it similar to OT, taking a more holistic view of a patient? Yes, but I wanted to take more of like a population level look at this. And so I did my third master's. I don't know if I mentioned, but OT was a master's in science. That's the second one. So then I did my third master's in public health at the University of Toronto. And that, my friends, is how one person can end up with 3 masters. I don't think that any child grows up thinking, you know what I want to do with my life? I want to do 3 master's degrees and be confused and try to navigate. I don't think that happens, but when it does, hey, you just got to go with the flow.
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, that snippet of your spoken word was amazing. And I really appreciate you sharing your story and even touching on the immigrant or immigrant parent experience, which is something that I personally resonate with.
Thanks, Abby. Yeah, I would love to hear your story, but I know that we can't do that today on this podcast, but maybe another time.
Of course, yes.
I would love to hear all of the stories. That was really amazing. Renira, I wanted to know if it's okay, what do you think that your dad would think now about kind of where your career is at?
Oh, absolutely. Without a doubt, he would be proud because what? I think, that generation of parents, they couldn't necessarily see the opportunities that we have today or couldn't conceptualize of a life that's different from that. Especially, growing up in South Africa at that time, there were probably only a few pathways to success. But today, that's not the case. And definitely living in different parts of the world gives you access to other opportunities as well. So quick answer, I know he would be proud of what I've done.
I can only imagine. Yeah, for sure. So you chatted a little bit about your education, the 3 masters. That is wild and very impressive. I want to talk a bit about your career. And when we spoke last, you let me know that some of your early days in this field were at CAMH. So I was wondering if you can share that with our listeners.
Sure. Yeah, I would say the role that I had at CAMH was foundational to my understanding of knowledge translation. In fact, everything that I learned about KT, I learned in that role. And it's the same stuff that, or at least part of the things that I teach now at SickKids. And I was quite fortunate, actually, because I joined at a time when there was a new research center that was just starting up. So donor funded for X number of years. It might have been 8. Don't quote me on that, but around 8 years. The center specifically was the Kundal Center for Child and Youth Depression. So if you can imagine, any new research center has a lot of work to do. Everything is new right now. Obviously, people joining the center come with different experiences. You have connections. It's not like everything is brand new, but a lot of things are brand new. So when you have a new research center, of course, you have to develop a logic model, a vision, a business plan. You've got to hire people. You've got to figure out where the research project's going to come from, for our center. How is the funding going to work? And a piece of that as well is the knowledge translation piece. At the time, I'm not sure that anyone really knew exactly what knowledge translation was, including myself. But I think the center knew that it wanted to develop tools that clinicians could use in practice, or it wanted to do things that would have an impact, which is kind of where KT, what KT does, but no one could perhaps articulate exactly, what KT is. And so I got into that role, and I had to learn the ropes because there was no one really who knew that much about KT. Now, of course, I had support. My team members, the director, everyone was super supportive in that role. But I think there's a difference between support and having guidance and mentorship from someone who's from your field, which is what I didn't have. So I had to navigate. I had to learn how to do KT. And over time, I created this kind of circle or this framework of what KT is. And maybe I'll just describe it to you because I think it does a good job of explaining what I did in that role. But the other thing is that it defines what a knowledge broker does a little bit more for people out there who, even after hearing my definition, may still not quite understand, like, what do knowledge brokers do in practice? So I'll just describe this framework that I developed. And it's by no means like a definitive framework of knowledge brokering. It's not even published anywhere. It's just a way for me to conceptualize of what a knowledge broker might do. So if you can close your eyes if you like and just picture this circle. I don't know why I said close your eyes. It doesn't really make a difference. But so there's a circle. There's 4 quadrants. One of those quadrants is what I call like products or tools. And this is where we develop things that are going to make our knowledge and our evidence easy to use in practice by the people who need to use that knowledge. So an example might be like a 2-page decision aid that summarizes a much longer clinical practice guideline that, a busy clinician may not have time to read. Sorry. And then that's just me coughing. And then that 2-page decision aid also became a larger project where we developed an interactive care pathway. It's like a separate website where, you can click on the care pathway. These boxes will open up and give you more information. And we also developed things like a quick guide to assessment tools, various different videos that we co-developed with young people and other partners. So that's an example of products and tools. Another quadrant is partnership. And, you may think, well, don't we all kind of work with partners in our roles? Probably. I would say you're right. But I think the difference is in KT, we actively think about partnership because as I think I mentioned before around the relevance piece, right? Like we like to engage different knowledge users, different audiences in the work that we do to make it relevant and therefore beneficial. And in order to do that, you need to build partnerships with people. So if you're developing something specifically for dietitians or coaches, you're going to want representatives of those people on some kind of list so that you can consult them and get their advice. So partnerships is part of it. The other quadrant or another quadrant is what I call knowledge translation activities. So those are things like, I would develop workshops or organize scientific retreats for the researchers at the center, organize large international conferences, which I did a couple of times, of course, with help from others. And then I would put implementation projects into that quadrant as well. So I worked on a project where we took a care pathway developed at the research center and we implemented it with a family health team in Ontario. So that's activities. And the last piece is communications. And you know what? Like, I think one of the most frequently asked questions in our KT trainings is what is the difference between KT and communications? I'm not sure my description of this quadrant will fully disperse or explain what the difference is, but it might help. So, I worked very closely with the communication manager at ChemH. We would meet every 2 weeks. I would give her the lowdown of all the research projects happening at the center, whether anything is newsworthy. She would help develop press releases when there was something that was newsworthy. She would, help edit certain video scripts, give the final green mark from the communications department, support, strategic development of our website and things like that. I just wanted to describe that circle because I think it gives you a good idea of what knowledge brokers might actually do in their roles. And also to say, coming back to, my enthusiasm about that role, like I said, it was foundational because I did a lot in that role. I had a lot of responsibilities. And as I said, everything I know now, I think I learned in that role. So I'm incredibly grateful that I had that opportunity to go through that circle and all of those different quadrants.
Even just you describing the quadrants makes me feel that role was huge. Like it was, yes, foundational, but also so much that you were involved in. As you said, like I can even tell just from hearing that. So, and I also appreciated the communications piece and you saying working closely as Abby and I are communicators. We always encourage our colleagues to reach out to us. We like those like regular touch points, not just, hey, I'm starting this project, but like, what are you working on? What are you thinking about? So, to have that relationship is really good. So I'm happy you mentioned that.
Yeah. And wouldn't your life be easier if you had like a go-to knowledge broker who could represent a bunch of different like researchers or other people?
Yes. I need a knowledge broker in my life.
Yeah. Don't we all?
Mm-hmm. I never knew I needed one until this conversation. Abby, remind me next week that we need to find one. I wanted to kind of speak a little bit about your role now at SickKids and the knowledge translation program, sort of what makes that program so world-renowned.
Yeah. Well, I think for anything to be world-renowned, there is more than one thing that needs to happen or be in place. So I think in our case, it would be having just a good quality product. Like we have good quality trainings, good quality tools that are informed by evidence that have been developed over years from people with different levels of experience and expertise. That's one thing. And then just the enthusiasm of the staff that work in our program is another thing. And then the reputation of SickKids. So I think all those things can come together or do come together to form the program that we have right now and the success that I think it is. I can go in a little bit more detail about what I think it actually is. I think, when it comes to our trainings, SickKids was a pioneer in the field. I think the first knowledge translation training was developed somewhere around 2004 and 2008 by Dr. Melanie Barwick, who is one of the co-founders of our program, also a senior scientist and a Canada Research Chair in implementation. So in that time period, she had received a grant to look into, what does knowledge brokering look like for a pediatric healthcare center, and also, what might training look like? And it was an important question because in the early 2000s is when that need for kind of KT training and building capacity kind of came up, because the Canadian Institutes for Health Research, or CIHR, started to become more interested in knowledge translation and started to require different research projects to have KT plans. And so if you're requiring something like that, you need to build capacity. And so that's how the initial training was born. And then since then, and over time, it's been informed by new evidence. We've reiterated it. We recently included a new module on equity, diversity, and inclusion in KT in one of our programs. So, being a pioneer, having the years of experience, having different people come on, we've also had a great international reach. One of our KT programs has been licensed to an organization in Australia, so it gets run there. We also recently did a customized training for an organization in Africa that supports other organizations all across Africa in different countries. And just last year, we hosted a visit by a knowledge translation program from the Middle East who had just started their program in 2022. And they had come to us for training and support. And we've since trained their director and I think all of their KT staff. So I think, when you have a good quality product, people see it. And it's been the case internationally as well. We've had, I think, people from somewhere around 20 different countries come to take our trainings. Our workshops are really fun too. Like I think they're fun anyway. Our staff are really enthusiastic, and I think that also plays a role in the success. We're also, I believe, a pioneer in the knowledge translation tools that we've put out there. We have a very specific one that if anyone out there is interested in developing a knowledge translation plan for a project, we have a tool that's, it's on our website. It's free that you can download. It's called the Knowledge Translation Planning Template. Developed in 2008 by Melanie, and it has been widely used across Canada and beyond. In fact, we've translated it to French, Spanish, and Portuguese with different partners around the world who had used it in English and thought, you know what, it might be helpful to have this in a different language in my country. And so we've done all those translations. So there's that. And then, of course, as I mentioned, the reputation of SickKids recently being named the #1 pediatric hospital in the world. Pretty cool, right? And definitely, I think, plays a role in that international reputation of our program. Although I will say that a lot of people who come to our courses, they come to us through word of mouth, which I think is the best place to come from, because it means that someone has taken your training or used your tool and they really liked it. And so they're starting to refer other people.
That's a really good overview. And I also wanted to say, the knowledge translation planning template, we can put that in our show notes so that we can share that as well. So it sounds it's really practical, and we'll check it out as well, and for our different subscribers and our listeners. So thank you.
Cool. Yeah, that'd be awesome.
When we last spoke, you told me that it's difficult to be a good knowledge broker without being on the ground and doing the work, so that there's no guidebook for this work. I just wanted to know what makes KT so challenging.
Yeah. I think there's a few things. So, one thing, so as I mentioned before, like when I started my role at CAMH, it was, I didn't really have someone else who had a lot of KT knowledge that I could go to. And so it can be a lonely feeling. And I know this is the case for a lot of other knowledge brokers across Canada, because they come to SickKids to get trained, and they will tell us this. They will say, I feel lonely. I'm so glad to be in this training because there's like 20 other people here who are doing what I'm doing. And it just feels very reassuring. So I think just the fact that some people will be the only person doing what they're doing in their team or in the department, sometimes even in an entire hospital, that can be very lonely. And another thing that's challenging is that context can be very, very different, right? Things can be very complex. Maybe you're working on a topic where there's a lot of research evidence. There's a lot of knowledge we have about that topic, and that can make your life easier, right? Or maybe you are working on a topic where there isn't a lot of evidence. And then that becomes really challenging, because how do you develop tools or make recommendations when the evidence is still emerging? It becomes a very fuzzy gray line. And I hear about it a lot from knowledge brokers, that sometimes they're just not sure. Like, in KT, we're meant to kind of share this knowledge and do it in a creative way. But how do I do that if I'm not too sure if the strength of evidence is there, right? So that can be very challenging. You might be working at a large academic center hospital like I am at SickKids, and you can have access to all these great resources and people that can help you. Or maybe your next role is in a small nonprofit and you don't have the same opportunities, the same access to resources. So that can be challenging. If you switch roles from that area to the other area, it can be very, very challenging. But I will say that despite the differences, there is a kind of standard approach or just a way of thinking like a knowledge translation professional that you can learn. And it involves asking questions like, why are we doing this? What is our goal? Who needs to be involved? What don't we know about this topic? Is there anything else we need to explore? And I know those sound like very, very simple questions, but you'd be surprised how often I've been at tables where those questions are not asked. It happens all the time. And so as a knowledge broker, you really learn like what how do I get information? What do I need to ask? One of the biggest lessons of our training is that you should always focus on why you're doing what you're doing, because I think we tend to jump to strategies right away. Oh, let's do a 2-minute video. Let's create a poster or a plain language summary. Let's host a conference. But you really need to take a step back and ask yourself, as an organization or a team or a department or a project, what do we actually want to accomplish? And it could be that the strategy you've already chosen does not align with the goal that you have. And then also, what makes it challenging? I would say, as a knowledge broker, you need to have a very broad skill set. So if you remember that circle, with all the different quadrants, right? That's a lot. There's a lot of different things that you need to do. Maybe one day you need to be a research analyst because you need to have the ability to understand the research, to know what's going on, to read a paper and be able to make sense of it, right? The next day, maybe you're a communications expert because you need to develop key messages about a few different projects. The next day, maybe you're an event planner because you're responsible for a large conference and for the success of that conference. The next day, you're a video editor because you're in charge of producing this video. The next day, you just need to flip a different switch and talk to a CEO. And then the next day you're talking to a young person. The next day you're talking to a clinician, right? So you really need to have a diverse skill set, which is another reason why I think this role can be very challenging. I do always say that I think there's really 4 skills that are critical to the success of good knowledge brokers. And one of those would be communication, right? You need to know how to communicate to different people. Why? Because people are important, relationships are important. So the second thing is you need to be able to build relationships. The third thing is you may want to be a little bit creative because KT is a very creative field. We're often making videos. Maybe you're developing a play or a song, or you're working with young people who have all sorts of creative strategies. So being creative is one. And then the last thing, and perhaps the most important thing, is critical thinking skills. You need to be able to read between the lines, to see, what's going on, not just on a project, but, perhaps in the politics behind the project. You also need to have the confidence to ask tough decisions to ask tough questions, not decisions, in a room full of world-renowned experts. So let's say you're at a table and, you're surrounded by these experts and they've all unanimously agreed on something. If you have even the smallest doubt about that decision, you need to be able to put your hand up and ask whatever question you want to ask, or just point out what you wanted to point out. And you don't get there without that skill of being able to think critically. And of course, it's not something that most new knowledge brokers have right away. I definitely didn't, but it is something that I would say I've developed over time.
That's challenging, but also exciting. Just the way you describe the day-to-day, one day you're doing this, one day you're doing that, and these are the kinds of skills you can pick up. Yeah, it's a big role, as I said. I was wondering if you had a very short elevator pitch, or in the elevator with a CEO, as you mentioned, and you have to pitch KT or say, talk about why it is so important. And you've mentioned a lot of the aspects, but what are you hoping that healthcare leaders understand about it?
I'm hoping they understand that knowledge translation is the missing link, that, it can take 17 years on average to take what we know in research from evidence and to apply that to practice. So knowledge translation is the field that can help you close that gap.
That's a good one.
Calling all art lovers and appreciators, we can all agree that art is central to understanding human experience and can provide valuable insights into innovation, leadership, and strategy. HIROC's new strategic plan, The Art of Safety, pulls from both the art and healthcare worlds. It leans into the idea that each person in the Canadian healthcare system has unique skills and talents that are valued. Most importantly, each is a gifted professional, or better yet, a unique artist who is there for their community. Learn more about the art of safety by heading over to HIROC.com or by clicking the link under mentioned in this episode. Enjoy the episode. And Renira, I was wondering, how does storytelling fit into knowledge translation?
Yeah, great question. So storytelling fits into everything. And I'm a little bit biased because, as I mentioned, I'm a storyteller. I've been teaching storytelling for almost 10 years now. And a few years ago, I licensed my storytelling workshops to SickKids. So I run them at SickKids twice a year, once online, once in person. So just to say, I'm very biased because I believe stories are so important, but and that they affect everything and fit everywhere. But anyway, to answer your question more specifically, as we talked about, knowledge translation requires sharing knowledge, right? And if you're sharing knowledge with somebody or evidence, you have to do it in a way that's clear, that makes sense to people, right? And storytelling can offer you that clarity. In fact, I have a line in my poem, the same poem I started earlier, where I'm talking to my dad and I say, "Dad, words are like paper planes that launch from a tongue. Don't shape them well, but then don't be stunned when they fly 2 inches before they plunge. Why can we only fold planes and tell stories when we're young?" So the point there is that the words we choose are important. The way we put sentences together, put arguments together, put our presentations together is important. And that's because our brains need a structure. We actually understand information in the form of a story first. And if the information that's being delivered to us is disorderly, if it doesn't make sense to us, we will zone out, or even worse, we might make our own interpretation of that information. So storytelling offers us, through story structuring, a way to shape information in a way that other people's brains need to understand it. Okay, so that's one thing. The second thing is that knowledge translation is going to require you to influence different audiences. Why? Because, chances are you have a message that you want people to adopt. Or if you're working on an implementation project, you need to get buy-in into that project. And even after you get buy-in, the need to tell the story doesn't change. More people might come on that project, or new people join your project, or the story of your project is going to change, especially as you expand or different things happen. And so you need to be able to articulate the story of what you do in a way that's going to resonate with different audiences in order to create that buy-in. So do I think stories on their own can bridge that gap that we talked about between knowledge and practice? No, of course not, because there isn't any single strategy that can do that. Change is hard, right? Whether it's practice change, policy change, behavior change, it's difficult, and you're going to need a multi-pronged strategy. But I do think that storytelling is a very important first step, and also something that's going to be important throughout the entire process.
I love how you speak about and explain the importance of storytelling. So I'll ask another question on that topic.
Sure.
We're seeing a bit of resurgence in long-form media like podcasts or articles in a world where we're still being told attention spans are limited and we should keep content short. So what is it about these longer form mediums that help those of us in healthcare communications drive that information and really make stories stick?
Yeah, that's a great question. I will say first that I think we need both. I think there's definitely a role for shorter form media. And one of the things it can do is drive you towards a longer form type of media. Or sometimes, you have a very simple goal. Like maybe you just want to raise awareness of a conference that's coming up, and maybe a simple, quick poster on social media will do. So it's definitely a time and a place for short form media. But long form media can do other things. And, maybe I'll explain this using a concept that I use in my storytelling course. It's actually by Aristotle, ancient Greek philosopher. So Aristotle says that if you want to convince someone of something, there are three things that you need: ethos, pathos, and logos. So pathos is emotion, right? Big part of storytelling. Emotion is what connects us to each other, helps us to understand different things, to understand experiences, a very important part of storytelling. And you will have much more time to express emotions in a longer form type of media. Can you have emotion short form media? Absolutely. Of course you can, right? Maybe you see an image that's really jarring, right? Right away, there's emotion. Or, maybe you see a reel that makes you really sad, right? That can absolutely happen. But good storytelling, when it comes to emotion, it doesn't keep you on a high the whole time, and it doesn't keep you on a low the whole time. Good stories move your emotions up and down to keep you engaged. And that really helps you to understand more kind of complex information and keep you engaged throughout the whole process. So that's pathos. The next thing, ethos, is credibility and trust. So again, can you have trust in a short form of media? Of course. Think about your logo. In my case, maybe it's a SickKids, CAMH logo, whatever the logo is at your organization, that can convey trust and credibility, right? Yes. But not always, because that trust and credibility doesn't always translate to different audiences. For example, I've worked with people in community who perhaps they've had a negative experience at a hospital, and all of a sudden they don't trust anything coming from that hospital. So when you have a longer form of media, you have more of an opportunity to tell your story, to perhaps address any misconceptions or any misinformation. You have an opportunity to build trust. Now, granted, with some audiences, trust can take decades to build. So a podcast, may not do it, but it will give you more time to tell your story. And then the last component is logos, which is logic or reason. So when you have a longer form of media like a podcast, you have more time to let your argument unfold, to put the facts together. And it also signals to people that, hey, this topic is important. It's not something we can address in 30 seconds. And it lets you explain the information, because complex topics, which, as you know, will occur in healthcare, sometimes will require more time to explain.
Thanks for speaking on this. I just have to say, I love how you break things down using examples or a quote or a poem or quadrants. But yes, I feel like long form media is underrated or underappreciated now more than ever. But like you said, both can be used depending on the time and the place.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know. I appreciate it too. All of the examples that you give just make us kind of, it really, as you said, like it helps, the story helps us drive what you're trying to tell us and teach it to us and help it stick in our brains. So it really, really helps me. Clearly, you're a very good speaker, you're a very good storyteller. I wanted to ask you, Renira, if you had to deliver a presentation on anything, it's not KT and it's not work related, 5 minutes without preparing at all, what topic would you choose? Could be anything else.
Follow your dreams. It would be all about the importance of following your dreams, because I feel like that is one of the main themes of my life, as you know, from my Genesis story.
That's true. I love that. That's a good one. I'm going to flip it over now to Abby. You've taught us so much already, but we want to ask you a few more questions, a few easy questions. We call it our lightning round, and then we will let you go. And we will learn. We hope our listeners have learned so much. I know I have.
Renira, can you name one book that has impacted you?
So I feel like I keep going on and on about follow your dreams, but I would say The Alchemist, because that's the message of the book. Follow your dreams.
That's an amazing one. And what's your go-to hobby when you need some downtime?
I know some people might not consider this downtime, but I love to meet up with friends or family and just have really great conversations.
Love that. And what or who can make you laugh without fail?
my little brother, specifically conversations we have together. We have the same personality type.
We're early into the year. Do you have a resolution or even something you want to stop doing?
You know what? I think so. I just came back from Cape Town. I was so I told you I'm South African. I was in Cape Town in December, and I did a storytelling talk at the University of Cape Town. And the number of students who came up to me with messages of gratitude was so inspiring that it got my brain to think like, you know what, I want to do more in South Africa or in Africa. What that looks like, I don't know. I'm not sure, but it's just something. It was a feeling that I was left with at the end of 2025 that I'm still want to explore. Maybe has nothing to do with storytelling. Maybe it means, I want to go back to my roots a little bit more. I want to see my family who's down there a little bit more. I don't know what it is, but something to do with that.
I love that resolution. And clearly your trip, something, spoke to you or resonated with you. So I'm glad it left that impact on you. And lastly, finish the sentence. If it wasn't a knowledge translation, I would be doing
stand-up comedy.
Yeah. You'd be good at that. You're a great speaker. So I feel like your jokes would definitely land. Well, thank you so much for sitting down with us, Renira. It was a pleasure hearing your story, getting to know you, and of course, learning about KT.
Thanks so much, Abby and Michelle. I had a great time, and I wish we could keep the conversation going because I know we all have stories, and I know all the listeners also have stories. So wouldn't it be lovely if, we could have some kind of big story time or something like that?
I know. I think so too. I think we'll have to keep the conversation going in some way after this. So maybe we'll hear from you again soon, but I loved it so much. Thank you, Renira.
Oh, thanks, Michelle. Thanks, Abby.
Thank you for listening. You can hear more episodes of Healthcare Changemakers on our website, HIROC.com, and on your favorite podcasting apps. If you like what you hear, please rate us or post a review. Healthcare Changemakers is recorded by HIROC's communications and marketing team and produced by Podfly Productions. Follow us on Twitter at HIROC Group or email us at communications@HIROC.com. We'd love to hear from you.